All right, so this is about cybersecurity, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Any IT pros in here? Anyone work in IT? All right, this is going to be fun. I'll just make it up as I go. So if you work in a hospital, work in any medical field whatsoever, if you're not in IT, you really don't know what IT does. And you don't really have a lot of understanding typically about cybersecurity. So you have a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt. You don't know if your team's doing their job. You don't know if the third party you're paying to take care of your infrastructure has really secured it. And oftentimes when you find out that they're not doing their job is when ransomware or something happens to your organization. So today I'm just going to be kind of doing some high level. I'll get in the weeds a little bit. My background is IT, so I'm going to try not to get too far in the weeds. But I'm going to do a little bit into the weeds, but I think it'll make sense. It'll all tie it together. And I'm going to be talking to you about cybersecurity and how you can get an understanding of your security and put a blueprint together to make sure that your team or your third party you're using is securing your environment. So fear, uncertainty, and doubt in cybersecurity, FUD. So if you guys don't use the term FUD a lot, you're going to use it a lot after today. So the first thing you need to know about cybersecurity is it's all about risk evaluation. What is your risk? What is going to happen? What is likely to happen for your organization? The way you judge risk is you ask all the questions. You get your team together, you get your professionals in the organization together, you bring managers in, you bring in third parties, and you ask all the questions. How are we going to operate if we have an event? Tornado, fire, flood, those are common ones we talk about. But the newest ones was COVID. Who would have thought 3 years ago that we'd have a biological contaminant or attack, basically, on our environments, and we would have to work outside of our organizations? That hospitals would have to send people home so that the administrative staff could still function without fear of becoming infected. It changed everyone's way of looking at security and at business continuity. So you need to be thinking about business continuity, how you're going to operate, ask all those questions. Okay, if you start thinking about cybersecurity and what you're going to do as an organization, the first thing you need to do is start with a budget. If you don't start with a budget, your IT team or your third party is going to just start throwing solutions and expensive stuff at you. Start with a budget. But don't expect the budget to stick. So I spent 6 years in the infantry, and one of the things that you hear is Murphy's laws of combat is no well-laid plan survives first contact. Your budget is not going to survive first contact with your IT team. So be ready for that. You can't stick to your budget like it's the only way of operating your business, but you need to start with something so someone knows where the goalpost starts and where it ends, but you can keep moving if you need to, okay? So get a budget, but be ready to be flexible. All right, now we're going to get into the weeds a little bit. RPO, Recovery Point Objective. These are going to be two terms you're going to hear from me. The next one's going to be RTO, Recovery Time Objective. As you work with your team, as you work within your organization, the number one thing you need to do is know that if your environment has some kind of major disaster that you can recover. A recovery point objective is how much data can you afford to lose. I'll give you an example of that. So if your IT team's backing up your data and they're doing an on-site and off-site backup and they're doing it once per day, that means that you can lose 24 hours worth of data. If you're a hospital working 24 hours a day, that's a lot of data that you could lose, right? If they're doing backups every 15 minutes, you can lose 15 minutes of data. Well, who wouldn't want to do a backup every 15 minutes? Well, do you have the administrative staff to deal with all the failures every 15 minutes? When you have a backup regimen that's very short, like every 15 minutes, you're going to have more failures on your backups, okay? That means more administrative overhead. So there's a balance. You need to find the balance in your organization of what can you recover from easily in a major catastrophe, and what are you willing to bear on the administrative overhead of managing it. So as a IT professional myself, when an organization says to me, I cannot afford to lose anything, we always start with this. I say, okay, give me a check, put a 1 on the far left, and I'll start filling in zeros. Because there's not going to be a time you're not going to be able to afford to lose anything that's not going to cost you an arm and a leg. It's not going to be financially feasible. You have to make a judgment call of how much data can you afford to lose. And it needs to be an educated judgment call. Now, there's segmented loss of data. We start with the whole destruction of your environment, right? Tornado, fire, flood. Complete loss. Ransomware is a complete loss. If your organization gets ransomware, you could lose everything in your environment. So we start with that. That's the biggest thing that could possibly happen. And then we start working our way down to the other smaller things that could fail within your organization, like just having one server die. Maybe it's your electronic medical records system. If it dies, how are you going to recover? How much data can you afford to lose on that one system? So granularly look at your entire system, figure out how much data you can afford to lose at different levels within your organization. This is the one that burns companies more than anything else. This is recovery time objective. Recovery time objective is how long can you afford to be down? A lot of organizations will say to me, we've got insurance, so if we get ransomware, we're not really worried about it, because if we get ransomware, insurance is going to pay out. But your recovery time objective, how long you're going to be down, is what costs you money. Your insurance company's probably not going to pay you to be non-productive for a very long period of time. And when you have ransomware, you're looking at weeks or even months of negotiations with the attacker, the person who's actually put ransomware in your system. There's the time of your employees not being productive during that time. And sure, maybe you're a rural hospital and those patients are going to come back next month and you're just going to work a lot more hours. But those expenses are very high and they add up very quick. A hospital in Oklahoma a couple of months ago was hit with ransomware, and so far we've been told is they're going to lose about 10% of their revenue over the course of the month that they were hit, not counting the amount they paid out on the ransom itself. So it can be very expensive. When organizations talk about how much time can I afford to be down, say you're a small clinic or a small hospital, you've got some servers in-house, you're running them in your environment, and the sprinklers go off for whatever reason over your server room. All your servers are destroyed. Does anyone know how long it takes to order a computer today? Has anyone tried to order one in your organization? There's a chip shortage going on right now. We're looking at 2 to 3 months to get desktops and laptops for our clients right now. So we're telling everyone, if you don't need them, but you think you're going to need them in 6 months, we need to be ordering today. So if your server dies, the sprinklers go off in your server room, how quickly do you think you can get a replacement server to restore? You've got good backups. You can restore all that data. How long does it take to get a new server in-house and restore that data on it? Well, you could be talking 2 or 3 months. So you got to be thinking about how you're going to recover. Good backups is great, but you got to have the hardware to actually restore onto as you build your infrastructure. All right. Okay, so failure. This is all part of that risk calculation. What could go wrong? What is likely to go wrong? Again, what could go wrong is you can come up with dozens of things, right? In the military, we always talked about nuclear, biological, and chemical warfare. That's what we prepared for in the military if we were going to go to war, okay? But you guys have to prepare for tornado, fire, flood, employee doing something dangerous on your network, causing harm. You've got ransomware, viruses, hardware failure, malicious employees quitting. You have an IT staff. I don't know if anyone's had any turnover on their IT staff within your organization, but right now there's a shortage of IT professionals, and we're not making more. You know, they're not churning out lots of IT guys right now. And so us as an IT business, we're having a hard time finding IT professionals. It's a very, very difficult thing to find someone that really knows how to support this infrastructure. So think about all of your failures that could go wrong, list them all out. But take that RPO and RTO that I talked about before to your IT department, to your organization, and tell them, I need to know how long can I afford to be down, and how much data can I afford to lose? And we need to decide that because those two things are going to determine everything that you do going forward and how much money you're going to spend to keep your infrastructure operational in the different emergencies that you want to be prepared to recover from. All right. Keep it simple, stupid. It doesn't have to be complex. It doesn't. There's a lot of complex things going on, but I'm going to tell you as an IT person myself, if you're working in a hospital and you have your own IT staff or you're going to a third party that's working on IT, we love to work on expensive technology. We may come to you, you say, hey, tell me what I need. And I can tell you, you need a $100,000 storage array, and you need to replace that every 5 years. That may not be the right answer. Let's keep it simple. What do you really need? So if your IT team is starting to come at you with lots of different technology and lots of different solutions to make your infrastructure operate, you need to go back to them and say, are we keeping it simple? Because those infrastructure, when your IT guy wants to learn that big storage array or he wants to put some real high-end solution in, it's good for his career, gives him lots of good knowledge, and it may be good for your hospital. But what the problem is if he leaves, who's going to come in and pick up where he left off? These systems, these high-end systems, take a lot of skill and expertise to manage. So when those employees that bring in that infrastructure leave your organization, that's now a disaster. That's a business continuity concern. And I've seen that firsthand with a large, about a 1,500 employee company. They had an IT guy. They brought us in because the systems that he was building and putting in for them, spending millions of dollars, were going up and down constantly, up and down. They brought me in to talk to him. He quit the next day. It's a mess because that skill, that is part of your business continuity, is your IT team, your staffing, your people turnover. And again, IT people are in demand right now. And since IT people are in demand, if they don't like you or they don't like the way things are going, they can likely leave and go find another job somewhere else. It is unbelievable the demand for IT people right now. Bright, shiny objects. Your IT guys love bright, shiny objects. I love bright, shiny objects. Everyone loves bright, shiny objects except the finance department. Your CFO does not like bright, shiny objects. He likes productivity and profitability, right? Okay, so you need to work with your staff. You need to know that, is it a bright, shiny object, or is it a productivity tool that is going to help the hospital or the organization prosper going forward? Do the obvious first. This is a big one. We're working with a company right now, about 900 employees, 30 locations, 3 countries. They brought us in about a week before they got hit with ransomware. They brought us in. We're in the middle of doing discovery on their environment, trying to figure out what's going on. We're finding lots of security vulnerabilities. And then the ransomware, the guy who was already in their system, hit them. Ransomware, the whole environment, well, about 70% of their environment got taken down, 100% of their servers. Now, they were able to recover without paying the ransom. The ransom was $4.8 million. But they were able to recover because they had a backup they didn't even know they had that was running in the background. So it was a fluke that they were able to recover. But that fluke saved them $4.8 million. Okay, so do the obvious first. So in this organization, they came to me and they said, hey, you know what? We found these 3-4 solutions that are called zero trust solutions. It's great. We really want to use these zero trust solutions. And they're going to allow us to do all these fancy things. And now we don't have to have all these other tools that are much more expensive. So we start looking at the software they're looking at. And yeah, it sounds great. But if you get out on like the discussion forums of people that are using the software, there's about 1 million things going wrong. The administrative management of those infrastructure solutions is through the roof. There's a lot of issues. It's great for mobile workers, but not great for in-house. It's not going to solve the problem. It is a bright, shiny object. And what we told them was we said, well, maybe we should get rid of your Server 2008 servers because they were obsolete 2 years ago before we start putting on new solutions. To me, it's funny because it's 2008 servers. They're not supported anymore. I mean, it's straight up against the law to run those in a hospital. Okay? They've been obsolete for 2 years. Yet they've got 100 of them running in production, the company that was hit with ransomware, and they want to buy a bright, shiny object. Let's fix the obvious first. There's policies, there's restrictions, and things you can do to secure your environment a great deal before we start throwing money at securing your environment. Add new solutions last. If you fixed your environment, if you've got patched servers and workstations, if you've got computers that are up to date, if you've got software that is being patched and up to date, if everything on your network is running the way it should be running properly, now we can look at security solutions to add on top of that. So some of these solutions here, I'm going to get into them in a minute, are SIM, EDR, PAM, etc. And so I'm going to dive into those, I think, let's see, right here. All right, this is the weeds. We're going to be in the weeds for a little bit here. So bear with me. If you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand, ask any questions that you might have. This is good stuff to take back to your IT department. If you guys want to take a picture of this, just say, hey, are we doing any of these things? Okay? You don't have to do all these to be secure. But what I will tell you is that the insurance brokers, your banks, if you're borrowing money for your business, the banks are starting to require a lot of these solutions. Otherwise, your premium is going up. Has anyone paid for their new insurance cyber liability premium in the last 6 months? Have you seen it go up significantly? So what they're doing now is they're saying, we want you to have all these. But what the problem is, you can have this game back and forth. And we've seen this with one of our clients, where you're talking to the insurance premium, they'll say, we want all these things. Well, okay, how much is my premium if I don't do these 3? Because these 3 can be really expensive. And they'll say, well, here's your premium. And they're playing this game of how much cyber, if I'm going to spend $15,000 in insurance, but it's going to cost me $20,000 a year on all these tools to secure my environment, and they're trying to find this balance of how much insurance should I carry versus spending money on tools. It's the wrong game to play. The game you should be playing is how do I secure my environment without going bankrupt? Because these tools are expensive. They are. See, that goes back to your risk and your RPO, RTO, determining what your organization needs to have to be recoverable, and then you have to spend the money to make it happen. All right, so first tool, endpoint detection and response. So everyone's heard of antivirus. We've all had it on our computers for years. There's a free one called Windows Defender. It comes on Windows 10. It's actually not a bad solution. Well, endpoint detection response is antivirus on steroids. What it does is it will actually look for ransomware events. We use one called Sentinel-1. It's a fantastic solution. It's one of the first solutions that organizations deploy when a ransomware event happens to help recover organizations. And so what it'll do is it'll see a threat on the network and it will roll that threat back. So if you have a threat and it starts to encrypt files, it will do snapshots and immediately roll them back, isolate the computer on the network. It's very smart. It's artificial intelligence driven. It's a very powerful solution. So EDR is eventually going to replace antivirus completely. It's going to be the only real solution out there. But it's very expensive because it's artificial intelligence. As soon as you put AI on technology, just figure you're going to pay about 3 times as much. Okay, it's not a cheap solution, but it is one of the best defenses against ransomware. Security Incident and Event Management System. This is the most expensive thing you can buy for security right now. Okay, what it does is it's a log aggregator. What I like to explain to people whenever we talk about ransomware, if you have a ransomware event, think of it like a crime scene, right? If you have a crime scene, someone's been shot, they're laying on the ground, there's bullet casings, someone's done a chalk outline, there's all this forensic evidence just around that you can kind of put the crime scene back together and they can find the person, hopefully, that committed the crime, right? When ransomware happens, there's no evidence. They've encrypted it all. They've stolen all the evidence, they've locked all your data down, there's nothing for me to go on to recover your environment at all. The best I can hope for is to come in and just wipe everything and reinstall everything from scratch. If anyone in here has ever deployed an electronic medical record system, was it cheap? Imagine doing it again, because you're going to have to do it again if that happens. If you lose all your data and your backups, that's what's going to have to happen. It's going to pay your EMR company to redeploy that. You might have a Pyxis system that goes down. You might have X-ray machines that have Windows XP, Windows Home, whatever operating system on it. Those could be lost. Now imagine paying to have all that reconfigured again. It's like starting all over again. You might as well just burn the building down and start it over. You've got the husk of the computers, the servers, the X-ray machines. You've got all that, but the operating system's gone. You've lost it all, okay? So what a security incident event management system does is it gives me forensic evidence as an IT professional to go in and figure out what happened and how to recover your environment. So an example of that would be, well, let me give you a little bit more about that. So what it does is it's a log aggregator. So your switches on your network, your firewall, your computers, your servers, all of your equipment create logs that make it so people like me can try to figure out what's going on. Now it's putting out logs so many a second on all this equipment, right? Tons of them. Well, when your systems become encrypted, all that data becomes inaccessible. It's just gone. I can't do anything with it. They're encrypted. I can't get in and see it. So this log aggregation system called a SIEM takes all those logs and stores them up in the cloud. What we store is for 6 months. And so then we can go in and we can get all that information out of the cloud and figure out what happened and how we can recover your environment if you got ransomware. It also does a thing called threat hunting. It's correlating logs across your entire network as things traverse your network and change on your computers so that it can then stop them mid-track. If it doesn't stop them, if you get ransomware, we can use this to go into your backups and then recover your environment. Now, why that's important? If you have backups, you think, I've got backups, I'm recoverable, I'm in good shape, right? I can bring my data back, I can restore, let's say you got spare servers, we're going to be operational in 24 hours, sounds great, right? The problem with most of the attacks today is there's this thing called dwell time. When the attackers attack your network now, they get into your network for 45, 90 days, and they embed in all your systems. Completely embedded in all your systems. What that means is now when I go to restore your data, what do you think is going to happen? They've got applications running in your systems, and when I restore them, they kick off, they ransomware again. So I have to find a way to get them out of your backups before I can even restore them. And that can take days, weeks, or months, because they can be totally embedded in those systems, which is a nightmare to try to recover from. Okay, so a security incident and event management system gives me log aggregation so that I can recover your environment. Multi-factor authentication. Anyone doing that yet on your networks, home? You know, first thing you saw with multi-factor was the banks got it first, right? You started seeing it to get into your bank account online. You'd have to get a text or some way to get in there with an extra code. It is a great security solution. Nobody likes it. Everybody hates it. Your doctors hate it. If you guys are in rural hospitals, I've heard doctors say, well, I won't work here anymore if you're going to make me do that. It's a tough battle to get people, especially because if you're in a rural hospital, you may have a hard enough time getting nurses and doctors out to your hospital to begin with. You certainly don't want to upset them by putting a bunch of hoops they got to jump through to be on your network, right? Not a lot of fun when you're having to fight your staff that you're having a hard enough time keeping coming out to rural hospitals. But multi-factor authentication is one of the better security tools you can do for one of the lowest costs. You need to have it on everything that you use in your network that is technology. That's logging into your computers, that's getting in from outside, that's getting in through your VPN tunnels. Everything should have some form of second form of authentication. We use a solution from a company called Duo. There's a free one. You can use Microsoft. You can layer it. There's a lot of different ways to do that. But you should be using multi-factor authentication to get into any system that contains or connects to electronic protected health information. Privileged access management. This is fairly new. Back in the day, 4 years ago, that's how much things have changed. So back in the day, 4 years ago, the typical way that organizations would operate is they would make every person that works on their own personal computer a local administrator. It's real easy that way. That means that you can do whatever you want on your computer. You can install software, you can install a printer. If you've got a laptop and you take it home or you're traveling, you can install anything you need to be able to do your job. Those days are over. That's going to be pretty much verboten very soon. Okay? The insurance brokers, the banks, and the federal government is starting to crack down on that. And so what they're starting to do is require a privileged access management system. So what that does is it says you cannot do anything on that computer without authorization. And the way that works in practice is like this. You go to install, let's say, a Zoom update. So everyone uses Zoom now. It's going to try to update about once a month or once a week, pretty often, right? So when it tries to update, it's going to prompt you and say, would you like to request approval to install this update? That approval would go to either your IT department, a department head, whoever has authorization to say yes. And they will get dinged on their computer and they can say yes. Or they can say no. And it's going to log that you installed that software. It's going to track everything, but it's going to prevent you from doing anything that's not authorized in the organization. Now, another part of this is whitelist and blacklist. Now we can actually say that this list of 40 applications are authorized for your organization, and you can install those. So why do we want to do something like this? Because when you're a local administrator, if you click on that website, I'll give you an example of that. Years ago, I worked for a company called Williams Energy. And we were on the trading floor. I used to trade and dispatch electricity for a living. I've had too many careers to even imagine. And it's a highly secure environment. And I was going to go to my Hotmail account. So you guys, anyone use Hotmail before, the old free Microsoft email? Well, I was in a hurry, and I was typing it, and I was doing something else, and I typed Hotmail, Hotmale. Well, you can imagine. I literally pushed the tower over and unplugged it from the wall, and this was like 15 years ago. And I was just like, I called the guys in the IT department back then. I was like, I did this. He goes, yeah, we saw it. That was an accident. He's like, sure it was. Okay. So what a privileged access management system would have done in my case, because I had pop-ups showing up, it was trying to install things, all kinds of bad stuff going on my computer. What a privileged access management system would do is it would say, first of all, it'd say, no, you can't do that without authorization. Then it's going to ding someone for every application trying to install on the computer. And that person who is authorized to say yes or no is going to get those, and they're going to just shut it down. It's going to protect you. But if everyone's a local administrator, like I was on my computer back about 15 years ago, it just started installing stuff. I mean, I just yanked the plug, pulled it out of the network, called the IT department, and they came and took care of it. It was a mess, and embarrassing. Advanced threat protection. So Microsoft kind of coined the term advanced threat protection for their solution, but it's really spam filtering. We've all used spam filtering on our email, but it's got very advanced now. So what spam filtering today is you can buy just spam filtering, and it looks at your email and looks to see if it's from a spam sender or so on. But what it really does now is a lot better than that. It's a lot more secure, is it does this thing called URL rewrite. So when you get those links that says your passwords needs to be changed for LinkedIn, and it's from a malicious attacker, when you click on that, it actually sends it to your spam filtering company. The company looks at the URL and says, oh, that's bogus, and then blocks you from going there. It's a really clever system, and most of your threats come through email still. So it will protect you that way. The other thing that it does, it's called remote detonation. That sounds pretty scary, doesn't it? So you get an attachment in your email, and it goes through your spam filtering solution, and they do not release it. They actually have a virtual environment, and they run whatever that attachment is to see if it tries to do something malicious, like running VB code, trying to do anything on your systems that's not authorized. If it does, it will not allow it to go through, and it'll let you know that it was blocked. So advanced threat protection is really, really good solution for securing your email and blocking people from being able to send you things that you may think are legitimate. Another thing that it does really well is there's a real common threat or attack going on right now with phishing email where people will go to your corporate website. And a lot of companies will put their CFO, CEO's name, maybe even their email address on their corporate website. And they'll go and find that, and they'll create an email account that looks very similar to that one, and they'll send an email purporting to be from the CEO to the CFO to wire money to so-and-so, right? So it's very clever. That's a clever attack. Well, when that happens, your spam filtering solution should be smart enough to go, that's not a real email account, because they have some kind of name matching for who's in your organization, that they're not from your organization, and be able to block that. Subscription-based firewall router. If you're in a large enterprise, this is pretty much just, you're going to have it. And when I say large enterprise, usually 200 employee organizations or more. Smaller organizations, clinics, and other places don't usually do this. And here's the reason you want a subscription-based firewall. Everyone has the old blue and black Linksys firewall at your home. We've been using them for years, or whatever you've got to run your network at home and put wireless so you can access things at your house. Those devices are actually pretty dumb. All they do is they block all the doors coming into your network and allow everything to go out of your network. That's it, okay? But the only thing they're doing is they're blocking known attacks coming in. Well, there's a million ways to come in outside of those doors. A smart firewall with a subscription is actually going to do things like antivirus on the gateway. It's going to read the actual packets going in and out of your network and determine if those packets are malicious and block things actively. And the only way it can do it is the same way that your antivirus does it, and that's having updated definitions. They're not going to give that to you for one fee. Now you own your firewall and your environment is secure. You're going to have to pay a subscription because they're doing active updates to that device. And there's other things on that subscription that you'll need. There's anti-malware, antivirus, intrusion protection, intrusion prevention, intrusion detection, content filtering. There's a lot of things that device will do. System patch management. If you've got a Windows 10 computer or even an Apple computer, you know how they tell you, you've got an update, you need to run it now, and a lot of us kind of ignore them. You need to have a centralized patch management system. Your system should be telling you that you have an update, and after a while it should say, you're updating now. Because people should not be able to ignore those updates. If you ignore patches on your computer, you're going to have a vulnerability attack your system, or you're going to have a vulnerability that's going to allow an attack on your system. Good example of that is Adobe Flash. Used to be Macromedia made Flash. Adobe acquired them. Flash is an animation software that's used as a plug-in in most browsers. It was very popular for many years, where you could watch videos in Adobe Flash. I think even YouTube used to do all their stuff in Flash at one time. Flash is gone. It had way too many security vulnerabilities. It's completely gone. There was emails that went out, all these notices to IT departments to get rid of it. To this day, every time I scan a new network for a prospective client for us, I find Adobe Flash pretty much globally deployed. So what does that mean? Well, if you've got a browser and it has Adobe Flash installed on it, and you go to a malicious website, it can execute on that Adobe Flash plugin in your browser and cause things to happen on your system, giving administrative rights and other things to the attacker. It's a very common attack. It's used all the time, and it works really, really well. So having a patching system, as well as a blacklist, whitelist system, looking for all the software on your systems that's installed, needs to be done regularly. Someone needs to be going into those systems, removing obsolete software, making sure that everything has patches on it. And it can't be done by just simply flipping the switch and saying, I want Windows Update to update my systems on a schedule. It has to be done centrally using some kind of software specialized to do that. If you don't have any centralized software to do that, there's no way for you to know if you're getting patched. Content filtering goes back to that Hotmail. You want to have that. Used to be, when content filtering first came out, it was a productivity tool. It was kind of in the infancy of Facebook and all the different social media. It's actually MySpace if you go way back. So it was a productivity tool back before everyone had high-speed internet at home. So 15 years ago, you'd be working in a Fortune 500 company and everyone's on MySpace and they're kind of wasting time and they're all talking and goofing off because they couldn't do that at home because everyone was on dial-up. So they all really enjoy doing that. So content filtering came out as a productivity tool to keep employees from going to websites you don't want them going to during the day. Those days are kind of over. I mean, you still want to be keeping your employees productive, but the truth is everyone's got one of these, and going to Facebook, you're going to do it on here anyway, right? So it's really not a productivity thing on the job anymore as it once was, but what it is now is keeping people from going to malicious websites. When we talked about advanced threat protection, that's your email. In your email, if you get a link that goes to a malicious website and you don't have advanced threat protection, there's a layered approach to this, right? So let's say you don't have advanced threat protection and it comes in, well, your content filtering is going to look at that URL and it's going to say it's blocked. So you kind of have two layers. So if you have advanced threat protection and it, for whatever reason, allows it, maybe your content filter is going to block it, right? It's like that old Shrek thing. He has layers, like an onion has layers. So you layer your security, and that's another layer in the security. Intrusion prevention, intrusion detection, that is just a very smart system that looks at threats attacking your network. And when it sees a threat, it blocks all communication from that threat actor based on IP, MAC address, or whatever information we can gather from the attacker, and it does it like that. Millions of attacks happen every minute. It can block those and immediately just kind of shut down all those attacks. One of the pieces that we use that we really like is geo-IP filtering. That's part of your subscription on your smart firewall. Geo-IP filtering. So IP addresses, if you're not familiar with them, IP addresses are like home addresses. You have a home address, but it may be, it's Brian's home is how everyone knows it. But the way everyone actually thinks it, or the way your packages get delivered is to an actual written address with a number and everything to find your home, right? Your IP address is that. It's how people find you. Those addresses are allocated based on regions and countries and so on. With geo-IP, we block countries like Iran, North Korea, Ukraine, all the known threat actors, and that reduces the attack footprint dramatically. So it's, again, that as one more thing in your layered defense. Mobile device management, that's a tough one. If you guys have hospitals and organizations and you allow your employees to put email on their personal phones, that could be EPHI on their phone that's unprotected. So if you do allow your employees to have it on their phones, having mobile device management and having a policy for managing those devices where you have the right to wipe them, they've agreed that you can wipe their phone if they quit or you terminate them or whatever, that's very important to have so you can protect your information. Third-party risk assessment. We all have IT professionals that work for us. Get a third party still. Have someone look at the infrastructure, maybe do a scan. Do it periodically, once a year, once every 3 years or whatever. But have someone else that's a third party do a risk assessment. Also do internal risk assessments. When you do risk assessments, it is really, really important to do a scan. If someone says, I can do your risk assessment, or your team says, hey, here's a checklist, that's not good enough. You got to do a scan, and you got to see in real time what's really going on in your network. Really dive into that. All right, so that's the weeds. And that's it. Any questions? Go ahead.
You want to go back?
Sure.
Is there any combination you've seen that's been more successful than others? I've worked for employers that have had all combinations of all of these, and we still get attacks. I mean, you run the website, you still see these flags from countries that are still trying to penetrate your website and things. But is there I'm assuming there's no special recipe, but is there something in particular that you would recommend for some smaller facilities like ours where we don't have a budget to implement some of these things? But
you know, it's funny. The number one attack vector is people. It's your employees. So having training is important, but actually, does everyone know what phishing is? Heard the term phishing? It's been around long enough now. So phish your own employees. Use a tool. They're not real expensive. We use one from a company called Breach Secure Now. I think you guys can buy it direct if you want to, but it's really inexpensive. And that allows you to send phishing emails to your employees, and then when they fall for them, you can send them to training that's remedial. And it gives you a real blueprint of who's really taking this training seriously, because what it'll do is say, if the email looks like this and it has these kind of characteristics, don't open it, okay? That's number one. So if you can train your employees, that's the first thing I would put money into is training and testing your employees by doing periodic phishing emails. And that's all gets scheduled through a third-party tool. And you basically, it's fire and forget. It's gonna send common phishing emails to your employees. It's gonna try to, it sounds awful, but it's going to try to catch them making mistakes. The tool we use has a feature called CatchPhish that I love. It's a plugin on the Outlook client or in the Outlook Web Access web client where the employee can actually get an email and they can click CatchPhish. And if it's one of the ones that we send, they can get points for that. And the person who catches the most fish at the end of the month gets a Starbucks gift card. And it makes it fun. It works really, really well. It's not punitive. It's more fun, and it's who catches the most fish gets like a $5 gift card or whatever. Now you can have a wall of shame if you want to, but I like the carrot more than the stick.
Did they pay for the gift card?
Yeah. So, any more questions? Did that answer your question?
Yeah, so you say education too, and the second question on the basically RTO, right? So your
recovery point objective, recovery time.
So I know some of this, for whatever reason, I've been victim of many employers that have fallen for everything you can imagine, and it's been an awful. I'm getting hot just thinking about all the things that you're talking about. But for some of the Trojans that maybe delayed release, do you suggest any certain timeline for
Yep.
You know, is there any experience you've seen on what the best timing is to obviously minimize impact? And of course, the tethers don't, like, you know, third-party vendors that are attached to the system all disconnect whenever you do have an event. So, you know, is there some suggestion on kind of what the recommendation is?
The most cost-effective backup tends to be once per day. So if you just do backup once per day, that's important. But backup is more than just how often you do it. It has to be detached from your network. So I'll just this is the best backup scenario for small business typically. If you're on a budget, you don't have a lot, you know, rural clinics and so on. Backup at least once per day on site. Encrypted at rest, encrypted in transit. That meets your HIPAA compliance, okay? And transit means you're going to do an on-site backup and you're going to do an off-site backup. That off-site backup needs to be completely separate network. It can be in the cloud, it can be on a hosting environment somewhere else, it could be in your remote office, but it cannot be on the same network segment. Because what attackers do is when they get in and they dwell in your network and then they attack you, the first thing they're trying to do is destroy your backups, because if you've got backups, your recoverability is very high, even if they're embedded in your backups. Exactly. And so make sure that your backups, because what we've seen on every ransomware incident that we've talked to the people recently is their backups were gone too. They corrupted them and destroyed all the backups that they had. So make sure your backups are off-site. The authentication mechanism for your backups cannot be the same. And I'll give you an example where your IT department, I don't know how you'd check this right off, I'd have to think about it, but we have a client we're working with right now. They got ransomware, they lost their backups, and this was not under us. So, you know, it could have been. I mean, it could have been under anyone. But they encrypted almost all their data. They wiped out all their backups. And the reason their backups were on a separate network. They had it on 2 separate networks. As a matter of fact, one in the cloud and one at a data center in Oklahoma City. The client was in Tulsa. They wiped out all their backups everywhere they were located. How they did that, even though they were completely separate networks, is the IT guys used the same password with a different account name for all 3 of those sites. And all the attacker did was went in there and just kept trying all the passwords that he was able to get, and he got in. And then when he destroyed those, he kicked off ransomware and he had them. So, did that answer your question? Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, would you want to spend maybe a couple minutes taking a step further in terms of CIO and the CEO? They may even have to incorporate the discussions with the board or audit committee or something. Walk me through a ransom of like how do you communicate with those folks? How do you report it if you do or not? Just kind of.
It's a really good question. We just did a webinar. I always forget the association name. What was the?
Oklahoma HFMA group.
Okay, yeah, we did, and we interviewed Alan, the CFO out at Stillwater Regional, and he kind of went through what he went through on that. And the first thing is it's almost denial. You know, your IT team's trying to figure out how much damage is done, and that can take hours. I mean, usually at that point they've unplugged, they know something's going on, they're just turning everything off. I mean, and then they're going to start turning things on and figuring out what was taken, what wasn't taken, right? And that can take hours, days, weeks. I mean, it can be a long time. In the meantime, you've called your insurance broker. That's the first person you're going to call. As soon as the CFO or whoever's in charge of that finds out what's going on, they're going to call the insurance broker, and they're going to call their attorneys. And those two are going to get together and they're going to figure out which forensics company that they're going to recommend that the hospital use. Forensics company is going to usually fly in from somewhere out of state. It's because we're Oklahoma. They're always going to bring someone in from California or New York. I don't know why, but that always is the case. So they bring them in, and then the forensics company comes in, and they use an external device that is read-only. And the first thing they do is start backing up everything you have, which takes hours or days depending on how much infrastructure you have, how much data they have to back up. It's just a USB drive. It's limited in throughput, and that's a read-only device. Once they've got that data, or while that's going on, they're negotiating with the attackers trying to figure out, or the ransomware company trying to figure out, you know, can they haggle the price down or whatever, okay? These companies have figured out how much they can charge you. They've looked at your financial statement, anything public about your organization. They know how much money you have and what you can afford to pay. It's brilliant how they do it. And they're a business. They'll tell you they're a business, and they think they're doing you a favor. They don't feel any guilt about what they're doing at all, none. What they're saying is, well, you should be happy it was us instead of someone else, because someone else could have destroyed everything. We're letting you buy it back. Isn't that kind? So the negotiations are going on. In the case of some of the ransomware attacks, they'll use different encryption keys for different servers so that they can actually sell you one server back, but not the whole server environment. So at some point, there's usually a settlement on what you're going to buy back, get the keys, decrypt certain amounts of your infrastructure, and then you're going to have to spend weeks, months, years recovering after that. And it goes on and on. With Alan, what he said is, he said, nothing's where it used to be. He said, that was one of the hardest things. He said, I always thought if you got ransomware, that you bought the keys and you were back in business. You just decrypted everything. That's not how it goes. Nothing is ever going to be the same. It's the same as starting over in most cases. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's what they're communicating with these ransomware folks through email, phone calls, or like how
Any method that they give them. So when you get ransomware, one of the first things that happens is they start dumping text files all over every system you have, telling you how to contact them. And it'll be email, maybe phone call, text message, any number of ways they want to do it. So it's very, very well organized.
Yeah, if I could add, mine was every printer in the entire facility kicked out a ransom note.
Yeah.
I had all the email address, and so it was very public very quickly.
Yeah.
And our forensic team came out of Florida, Silent, came out of Florida, and it was probably the most catastrophic thing you can imagine, because now you have to deal with the Office of Civil Rights. You had to send letters, you had notification based on less than 500 and more than 500 records that could have been breached. We had to contact our internet service provider, ISP, to see if any data had been offloaded, in the middle of the night. I mean, it was a 6-month process, and it was just like your house turned inside out.
It's worse than a bomb going off.
Yeah, it's awful.
I mean, because your data they're in your network. It's like a robber in your house and you can't find him. And every time you turn around, something else is missing. I mean, you can't do anything about it except pay them to go away. And then once you've paid them, then it's kind of, okay, can we get them cleaned out of our system completely? Or are they going to come back in 6 months or a year? How do we do that? Well, the only way you're going to do that, it's not just decrypt your systems and start putting new security in. It's decrypt your systems, take your data out of those recovered systems, wipe those systems completely, and then build new systems, and then try to import your SQL Server database and all your stuff from all your EMR into a new system. Nothing's going to look like it did before. The productivity of your organization is just until this is done. And again, it's a long time. So, any more questions? I think we're over time, actually. Are we? Okay. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.